Bob Marley and the Wailers, and from Lion Zion, this is The Voice. Good afternoon, how are you? And a very warm welcome to my good friend Jake Goodenough from Somewhere to Travel To, as the Voice Travel Club is now in town this afternoon. Good afternoon, Jake, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Jolly good. So, what have you been up to since we last met then?
Well, I know Diane told you about our fascinating trip down the Nile a couple of weeks ago, which was my first experience of Egypt, and I absolutely loved it. Completely opened my eyes to all the misapprehensions I'd had about Egypt being unfounded. So definitely take heed of Diane's advice and get booking a trip to Egypt.
Fantastic, brilliant. So that was a cruise down or up the Nile. We did have this conversation actually. Is it up or down? But
I can't remember what Diane's answer was, but I think.
Do you know what?
Down.
Neither can I. As soon as I opened my mouth, I thought to myself, I'm leading myself into a corner here, because I can't remember now what she said, but I'm sure she will put us both right.
Absolutely.
Between now and the next time we meet.
Yes.
So, how is the travel market at the moment, and what is the latest news?
It's really good. Well, September's generally one of our busiest months in the travel industry. The year always starts off quite busy, and then there's a little dip towards the early summer when it gets a little bit quieter, and then September's another sort of peak before quietening down before Christmas in terms of when you're taking bookings and so on. So it's been a fairly hectic but fruitful month. So very pleased with everything that we've been doing, and we've even got a vacancy for any listeners that fancy a career in travel. They can get in touch with us. We do have a staff vacancy for our Ilfracombe branch at the moment.
Fantastic. And obviously there are the occasional perks.
Well, a few. Yes.
Yes.
We don't like to brag about them or anything, but
No.
yes, there are a few perks to working in the industry, and definitely perks which I like to take advantage of whenever I get the chance.
But I mean, you use the word perks, but it's no different to you becoming I'm trying to think of an example here. Let's say you became a motor mechanic for a brand, and you go off to head office for training so that you can understand and know your product inside out. It's the same thing, isn't it, really? The fact that your training centre can be anywhere in the world.
Absolutely, and I think the whole thing that I find really rewarding about selling holidays is that we're generally selling a dream. And I remember one of my first line managers when I started out in the industry made the very good point to me that a holiday is the one thing that you have to pay for before you get to experience. If you have a meal out in a restaurant, you eat it before you pay for it. If you go shopping for clothes, you try them on and make sure you're happy with them before you purchase them, and that sort of thing. But a holiday is completely different. You have to trust what you're being sold, and so selling a dream is it can be very rewarding, and really does make any stresses that come with the job all worthwhile.
And of course, it's not a cheap dream either, is it?
No.
So if somebody's spending several £1,000s on a holiday, as you say, possibly the holiday of a lifetime, to speak with somebody who has got first-hand knowledge or experience of either the destination they want to go to or has a general understanding of it, it does help that decision.
Definitely.
And it certainly, as you say, hopefully they'll be able to answer any questions that you have, so that you can avoid any pitfalls.
And it's always really lovely, regardless of people's budget, but when you meet people for the first time that are looking for a trip that sort of put themselves into your care, and whether they're spending £500 or £1,000 or several £1,000s, when they're relying on you to spend their money wisely for them, the responsibility and getting it right can be very rewarding.
And that is the big advantage of going to a specialist agent rather than booking things online, because you can speak to people that have got the knowledge.
Definitely.
And in many cases the experience, so it's well worth it.
And it's one of those things that everything generally is right for somebody, but it's working out what's right for the individual. So when you go onto a website and everything's shouting about how wonderful a particular thing is, it's working out whether that type of wonderful is actually right for you as a buyer, and that's where the agent becomes invaluable, because they can interpret the sales speak for you and make sure you're buying wisely.
Absolutely. So, any news that we should be aware of in the travel and holiday industry over the last couple of weeks?
Well, there's a couple of stories that I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention, and one has sort of started wrapping itself up in the last half an hour or so. When I checked the headlines before I came out of the office, having planned to talk about this subject, I then saw that it was on its way to being sorted out.
So this is really hot off the news, latest news. Then.
Absolutely, yes. So a lot of people might be aware that Air France have been having a pilot strike recently, and it's gone on for about 10 days now and has caused massive issues to their network. And one of the biggest airlines in the world having a pilot strike is a big deal, particularly in Europe when it's a carrier like Air France.
Yes.
And it's all centred around the fact that Air France, in a bid to cut costs to remain competitive and profitable for their shareholders and what have you, have been looking to restructure their business and essentially wanted to separate their short-haul flying from their longer flights and run the short-haul flights on a low-cost airline model, by expanding the reach of one of their subsidiaries called Transavia. And the Air France pilots from the parent company, who would have been affected by that, have obviously decided they're not going to stand for that. They're not going to stand for the revised working conditions, which means more hours, less money, no doubt, to remain competitive and profitable in the shareholders' eyes. And so they went on strike. And it's resulted in a couple of hours ago Air France announcing that the pilots had been successful and that the plan to remodel their low-cost subsidiary wasn't going to go ahead in the same shape or form that they'd planned. So a victory for the striking pilots. But at the moment, after 10 days of huge disruption, it is going to still take a few days for the airline to get back to normal from a scheduling perspective. And so if you're flying with Air France in the next couple of days and are breathing a sigh of relief in the fact that the strike has been called off, don't sort of count your chickens before they hatch. Still check with your agent or the company you booked through or the airline directly about whether your flights are running or whether there's any timing changes and what have you, because with aircraft out of position in the wrong places at the wrong times and so on, there could be some changes over the next few days while Air France get back to normal.
Good advice then. So check with the airline and make sure
you've got access to a website. Make sure you've got a telephone number stored in your mobile phone that you can get through to somebody for assistance with those couple of tips. Just keep checking before you leave for the airport and you should be fine.
Good. Now, what about the escalating situation in the Middle East? Have there been any changes to advice and recommendations over the last couple of weeks?
Not generally to the tourist hotspots. Places like Turkey, the Foreign Office is still saying the tourist resorts are perfectly safe to travel to. The travel advice and the sort of no-go zones are those that have always been on the no-go zones for the last year at least anyway. I would anticipate that depending on how the next couple of weeks pan out, there could be some changes, but at the moment, nothing to be unduly concerned about if you're going to somewhere, let's say, mainstream. A general rule of thumb is that charter flights, the likes of sort of Thomson and Thomas Cook and those sorts of carriers, can only operate with government approval. So if you're going to a destination that one of those companies flies their aircraft to, it's okay. If you're going somewhere that charter flights don't go to, then the scheduled airlines operate to a slightly different criteria, and it's just worth checking the Foreign and Commonwealth website. But if, for example, you are booked on a holiday with Thomson or Thomas Cook and the tour operator hasn't cancelled it, then that's an indication that it's perfectly safe.
But again, the advice is as normal. If in doubt, contact either your agent or, as you say, you can go onto the Foreign and Commonwealth office at the Foreign Office to answer those questions.
Absolutely, and I think it's important, don't ever feel that you're being a pest by asking the question or whatever. It's much, much better to have customers that are happy and content and looking forward to their trip rather than people that are anxious and worrying. And so we'd always much rather put your mind at rest by going through the situation with you. We won't necessarily be able to magic a wand and make things right, but we'll always give you all of the information so that you're aware of the situation situation, and I'm sure that goes for every agency out there.
Brilliant. So here we are. It's the latter part of September. Christmas is not that many months away. Now, Diane and I did briefly talk about the Christmas markets in Europe. Are you finding this year, are there any particular trends that are starting to open up, people wanting to travel over the festive season to any exciting parts of the world?
Definitely. And one of the places that's actually in my opinion, an undiscovered gem is Poland. I went to Warsaw just before New Year last year, between Christmas and New Year, on our way to Istanbul, and I was really, really pleasantly surprised about how charming it was. The streets looked like they were off the front of a biscuit box. There was lots of beautiful decorations in a very authentic and traditional way, some lovely markets, and Krakow as well, although I've not been there, I understand to be even bigger and better than what I experienced in Warsaw, and it was just full of Eastern charm and very, very cheap. So definitely, if you're thinking of maybe a little couple of days away to get into the festive spirit, make sure you look up Poland.
Good idea. I'd give that a try. Yeah, it's a place you'd never think of.
And it's so easy to get to from local airports. Ryanair have numerous routes into Poland from Bristol, as do EasyJet. So you can get there very economically. Accommodation is cheap. It's not got a strong currency versus the pound, so your money goes a long, long way. And the people were incredibly welcoming and friendly. So definitely, as for a city break that you wouldn't necessarily think of, Warsaw and Krakow, which should be top of the list.
Brilliant. I'll add that to my list of places I want to go to. Fantastic. Lovely. Well, in just a moment, we're going to be talking about flights and flying and some advice on how to make, especially, I suppose, more relevant to long-haul flights, how to make them comfortable and enjoyable. Fantastic. Lovely. Jake Goodenough from Somewhere to Travel to the Travel Club. That's what we'll be talking about in just a moment. Ugly Heart GRL here on The Voice. It is the Travel Club, and joining me this afternoon, Jake Goodenough from Somewhere to Travel to in Ilfracombe. So flying, most people have flown, and obviously some of us have done long haul flights. Some people may have just done short haul flights. Now, whatever length of time you're flying, I'm guessing there are tips and ideas that you can give us, Jake, to make the flight more comfortable, more enjoyable, more relaxing, etc., etc.
Well, I always find one of the most stressful parts of travelling, in a lot of passengers' opinions, is the movement through the airport. So from queuing for check-in, queuing for security, all of those bits.
You've had enough before you've got to the gate,
Absolutely.
Haven't you?
And for me, as an individual, I absolutely hate queuing. I don't mind walking a long way to get somewhere. I don't mind if your flight is going from the gate furthest away from the terminal, so it's a 15-minute walk down there. It's the whole standing still and waiting that
I'm with you on that.
I can't do. I don't know whether it's because I'm British or or what it is, but I just don't like queuing. So over my recent travels over the last few years, I've made a point of doing everything I can to get my queuing down to a bare minimum. So first thing, check in online. Pretty much every airline operating these days offers some sort of online check-in facility, and whilst it doesn't necessarily do much other than cut out the queue for check-in, because the airlines have a dedicated bag drop desk for people that have checked in online. It's a way you can eliminate that whole queuing to check yourself in for the flight. Also, you get to know in advance where you're going to be sat. You don't have to worry about the stress of waiting until you get to the front of the queue to know, are we going to be sat together? Will the kids be 3 miles down the back of the plane? Will I be separated from the partner I'm on my honeymoon with? That sort of thing. Yeah. If you check in online, you generally choose your seats at that time. You get to look at the seat map yourself. You can decide as a family who's going to sit where. And if you want to put the kids at the back of the plane, well, then you can, but you don't have
Sounds like a good plan to me, that does. So no, you actually hit on a good point there, because I mean, obviously depending on who you're travelling with, but you usually don't have a choice in where you sit if you do the normal sort of thing of going and checking in at the airport. But if you do it online, from what you've just said, is that generally fairly commonplace, or is it only certain airlines that will allow you to choose your seat?
Pretty much every airline that offers online check-in gives you an opportunity to choose your seat. The couple of exceptions being the low-cost carriers, which will automatically select a seat for you.
Yeah.
Although, from my experience, when they automatically select a seat for you, they automatically put you together. So unless you check in 2 hours before the flight online, you're unlikely to be separated. For example, EasyJet and Ryanair, you can check in online up to a month before your flight now.
Really?
So if you do check in 30 days before with EasyJet, you don't have to select the paid seating option. You can just let it choose your seat automatically, and their computer system sort of runs the seat numbers chronologically and allocates you into the next 5 seats, for example, if you're a family of 5 or what have you. So it's a nice little way of cheating the fees for the sitting together supplements that some of the lower cost carriers charge. The likes of Virgin Atlantic and British Airways and the big scheduled carriers, you can choose your seat as part of the online check-in journey. So it brings up a little seat map, and some of them are quite quirky and have little cartoons of people that you sort of click on and drag into the seat that you want to sit on. Others are just a bit more sort of corporate and straightforward, and it just clicks on a dot to represent the seat that you want to sit in. But you do get that element of choice. There can be a really big rush at most airlines. You can check in online 24 hours before the flight, and there can be a really big rush at that sort of T-minus 23 hours 59 minutes moment, when
that initial rush,
which can mean sometimes you get the odd error message or what have you, but keep persevering, because that whole knowing where you're going to sit, knowing that you're relatively happy with the allocated seating that you've got, can cut out a lot of stress for a lot of people, because a 9-hour flight, if you're going long haul, is a big part of your holiday for a lot of people, and they want to be able to sit with the people they're travelling with and so on. So it's a great tool. So that's my first tip. Always do online check-in, and then when you get to the airport, going through security is generally the next big hurdle, and I'm a firm believer that we make it worse by ourselves. I'm always generally stood in a queue behind somebody that's wearing 15 belts, a pair of Doc Martin boots, and hasn't separated all of the stuff in their hand baggage so that they can easily take their liquids out and that sort of thing. So my top tip number 1 for getting through security easily and with a minimum of stress: choose clothing that you don't have to wear a belt. A nice pair of jogging bottoms or something nice and comfortable if you're going to be on a long flight, that doesn't need to be held up with a lot of belts is ideal. In terms of footwear, I've generally taken to choosing shoes that are either sort of slip-on type things or even flip-flops if you're going to a hot country. Are great for travel because your feet can breathe and you don't end up with stinky, sweaty feet at the end of a flight. And they're easy to slip off if the security screening requires you to do so. And the other thing, when you're packing your hand baggage, remember the airlines require security to confiscate any liquids that are over 100 millilitres in quantity. So have a look at your bottles of toiletries and things that you're taking. If you're going hand baggage only and you need to take toiletries and can't put them in your checked baggage, then it's well worth a quick purchase from a high street chemist or supermarket to get the little travel-sized bottles of things, because it will make your life a lot easier. And if you can, pick up a clear sandwich bag or something before you go, stick your toiletries in there, and then they're all in one place for you to just scoop out, put in the security tray for it to go through the X-ray machine, rather than having to pick things out of your bag individually, which then delays everybody behind, and you'll start getting tutted at, and then that all creates a bit of stress and friction in the queue.
And it's a fairly stressful experience anyway, generally, airports, as we've already said.
And I've found that with doing those couple of things, particularly in terms of clothing, not having to worry about pulling my belt off or heaving my shoes off, and then when you get the other side, putting them back on and so on, really just makes it so much easier. And it's nice if you are stuck in a queue because of somebody else. It's always less stressful if it's because of somebody else that you can have a bit of a joke between your travelling companions about, rather than you being the focus of why the queue is held up and delayed. And another important thing, a lot of airlines have started now not allowing you to take any electrical item on a flight that can't be powered on. So whereas you're allowed to take iPads and mobile phones and things on your flight, and you can use them with a flight safe mode, you have to make sure that your battery is charged, because there has been various terrorism threats and things where battery cells were used to disguise explosives and what have you. And for that reason, to make sure that we all travel safely, airlines will do spot checks, and if you can't turn your battery operated item on, it will be confiscated, even if it cost you £499 or was a precious gift from a loved one. If you can't turn it on, you won't be able to take it on board. So make sure you've charged everything before you leave for the airport. And if you're sat around in the departure terminal and you're near a plug socket, just plug it in and charge it up, just to make sure you don't have any last minute panics or issues. Because I think traveling with comfort is all about reducing the panic and the reasons for panic and the reasons for things to go wrong. And the other thing, just allow as much time as you can. There's nothing worse than having to dash everywhere and being worried about missing your flight or your train. Allow an extra half an hour if you can. Worst case scenario, you've got a bit of time to kill at an airport and you can grab a coffee or grab a snack. It's much more relaxing to do that than be sprinting and stressing because you're 5 minutes away from takeoff time and you've still not reached Gatwick.
Still trying to find a parking space.
Absolutely.
Now, what about if you are on a long haul flight, and we've all done these flights where you feel as though you're shoveled in, pigs in a pen almost. There's hardly any room to move. I mean, I've been on a long haul flight to Los Angeles before now, and the seat in front of you can almost touch your nose on the front of it because you are packed so tightly in.
Yeah.
I mean, what advice do you give to people to try and, you can't necessarily avoid that particular situation, but is it, again, going back to what you said about wearing clothing that is suitable and easy to go through security, same sort of thing for sitting on long
if you're
haul
wearing
flights.
something nice and loose and stretchy and that's not going to make you feel constricted, that will help your feeling of being claustrophobic if you're in economy and packed into a small space. Also consider whether it's worth purchasing an exit row seat or an extra legroom seat. The big airlines tend to sell those now at a premium, but not necessarily a high premium. With some of the US carriers, you can get a legroom seat for in the region of $50, which is about £30, and likewise with Virgin and BA, they sell seats with extra space at the same sort of supplement, and that little extra can make particularly a 9, 10, 11 hour journey like if you were going to Los Angeles so much more comfortable. You still get the same seat and same service, but it's just those couple of extra inches legroom that will
makes a big difference.
Make you feel less claustrophobic. Getting an aisle seat, another benefit of checking in online, can be great. And also make sure you don't feel like you're having to sit in one place all the way through the flight. If you get up and move about the cabin, make sure you go to the toilet frequently if you need an excuse to get up and walk around, or walk up to the galley and ask the cabin crew for an extra drink every now and again. Obviously a soft drink, not an alcoholic drink, because we don't want to incite air rage or anything like that.
Definitely
and
not.
we want to keep nice and hydrated for the benefit of our skin and our well-being when we're flying. But moving around is invaluable, because as well as getting the blood circulating, it will give you a moment out of your cramped little seat.
Yeah. Now, very briefly, we sort of touched on that just now. We touched on it as the first topic we talked about, and that is checking in online. Now, you did sort of allude to the answer to the question I'm about to ask, and that is, if you you have the option to choose your seat, do you normally have to pay for that option, or are some airlines giving you that option free of charge?
Most airlines, you can choose your seat free of charge, and then it's generally just the low-cost airlines where you can either let the airline allocate you a seat, but you'll find out instantly what it is, or you can pay them a small supplement to choose.
So it's more a case of the budget airlines that
Yes.
you have to pay that small.
The budget airlines that like finding a little way to extract a few extra pounds from you in whatever way they can.
They got to make their money somehow, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they charge you for everything on top of it.
Yeah.
Jolly good. Okay, so voluntourism is our next subject. We'll be talking about that in just a few moments' time. Jake Goodenough from Somewhere to Travel To. It's the Voice Travel Club.
Love Barnstable. Love the voice.
It's all good.
That's Union J. Tonight will live forever. That's a nice idea, isn't it? I'm not sure whether I like the idea of living forever, but a long time would be good. This is The Voice, Thursday afternoon, end of September. It's getting very autumnal looking out there. We may have to close the window in a minute because it's going to rain by the looks of that sky. Joining me this afternoon is Jake Goodenough from Somewhere to Travel To, the Voice Travel Club. Finally, volunteering, Jake. That's opened up a whole new marketplace in terms of holiday and a brand new word for the Oxford English Dictionary, voluntourism.
Absolutely, and it's something that has been rapidly increasing in popularity, fueled mainly by gap year travellers and the younger sort of 18 to 25 market, although it is a market space that's open to anybody of any age. But there's some really fantastic, interesting projects that you can go out and get involved with. We've recently booked some people to go and work on a project with lion cubs in South Africa, and they'll be flying out, spending a couple of weeks involved with white lion research.
Oh, wow.
And working in a conservation home for the cubs, and getting sort of hands-on with the animals, which will be a really unique experience and not your everyday summer holiday, as well as projects involving animals like lions. There's also some options to go out to South Africa and do football coaching, following on from its success hosting the 2010 World Cup. There's been some projects opened up to teach football in some of the townships and more deprived parts of the country, so that it's opened up to the whole population rather than just the wealthy. Aside from sports, you can get involved with community projects and building. There's projects shortly after the tsunami. There was a lot of projects in Sri Lanka to do with rebuilding and reconstructing homes and community buildings and so on. Although the Sri Lanka projects aren't tsunami related now, having been several years and the country has re-established itself, across the world in third world areas, there are a lot of community-based projects that you can go and get involved with. So if you have a skill, if you're a carpenter by trade, and you want to spend your holiday time doing something that is seen as a benefit to an overseas community, that can be a great rewarding thing to do. And it might sound a daunting type of holiday, but actually there's organisations that are set up to sell them in a very similar way that you would book a regular holiday to Spain or Portugal, for example. Your flights can be put in with a package. You're looked after by an overseas host that'll make sure that you're in the right place at the right time. And you're generally doing these things as a group. They're not individual things where you're left on your own to build a house or anything like that. So from a sort of team building spirit, they're really good.
So it's a sort of a variation on an adventure holiday, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. And the popularity of them has come about as a result of the popularity of gap years. And in fact, there's been some negative commentary on them in various newspapers and things. I came across an article in The Independent which was implying that it wasn't necessarily a good thing to promote voluntourism, because you could be in situations where untrained people would be building homes in India or building water irrigation systems that weren't actually viable in the long term or sustainable, and a sort of hindrance to the communities that they were supposed to be benefiting.
But I'm guessing that any of these type of holidays, it is supervised. You're under supervision.
Absolutely. I think, to be honest, that particular article was a bit of scaremongering and
it was just a bit too much on the negative side.
Yeah. But I'm sure, as with a lot of travel, it's one of those things to make sure you're buying wisely and choosing an organisation that's got established with a good track record in these sorts of projects, and isn't just going to be starting something somewhere and never finishing it because it's a string of tourists. There's a company called Real Gap that we work with a lot that have a very good pedigree in these sorts of projects and are very established in that field. And if you don't want to get sort of hands dirty on one of these trips. There's also things like you can go and teach English as a foreign language in African countries, and even in Europe as a volunteering holiday. In some of the poorer European countries, you can go in as a sort of summer school teaching assistant kind of thing to do English as a foreign language, which maybe isn't as daunting a project if you're interested in doing something like that on holiday, but have been a bit terrified of the prospect.
Again, I assume that within reason there are so many different options that depending on where your interests lie, there is a good possibility that you'll find something that will match in with that interest of yours.
Absolutely, yeah.
And do you, people doing on these holidays or going on these holidays, I take it they pay for their transport and their flights as normal. They pay for their accommodation.
You buy a package. So generally, the volunteering project that you want to do will have a set tariff for the accommodation, which will always be of a fairly basic nature. You wouldn't be staying in a 5-star luxury hotel and then going out to help build a water irrigation
nice thought,
system
but not quite the case.
Exactly. It'll be a package that includes basic accommodation, your basic board, and then the flights and transport to the location as well.
Fantastic. And as you say, this is becoming more and more popular now.
Definitely. I think the years of people just wanting to do a trip around the world on a jolly between college and university, for example, are probably they're disappearing into the past. I think people want to have a bit more of a rewarding life story to look back on in future years, and it's a good conversation point as well, and particularly for younger people that want to have a good interview story, for example, being able to tell an employer, that a prospective employer, that you've been out and worked on one of these projects can,
and although obviously
set you apart.
They're open to people of all ages, but I'm guessing the biggest take up is going to be with younger people.
I think in terms of the people that want to go out and do it, yes. And I think the people that these organisations would love to have getting involved with the projects are qualified people, as well as people that are just willing and able. The people that have a skill are always in great demand for these sorts of projects.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Jake. Some interesting topics as usual. So have you got any trips planned over the next few weeks?
I'm not anywhere until Christmas now.
All right, that's
apart
a long
from
break.
A few days in Birmingham at the NEC wedding show.
I see.
Some
it's not quite as exotic as some of the other places you've been to, though.
I actually really like Birmingham. For a little weekend away, I was quite pleasantly surprised when I first went there. There's some great restaurants that will have a few nice meals out.
Brilliant.
All the canal side areas are good shopping. It's a nice change from Barnstable. I love Barnstable, but you can't beat a trip into the big city sometimes.
No, absolutely not. Fantastic. Well, we'll see you in about 4 weeks' time.
Absolutely.
And I believe that one of the topics that Diane's going to be talking about in a couple of weeks' times is a subject that you just mentioned when you're going to Birmingham.
Weddings.
Yes.
Yeah, we do a lot of weddings in our business, and send a lot of happy couples off to share a life together, and it's a growing area for the travel sector, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't realise how money saving it can be versus the cost of having a wedding in the UK. People's parents, if their parents are paying for a wedding, probably would like them to get married abroad. It would save them a lot of pennies. So
absolutely,
we'll give some tips on how to do it.
Brilliant stuff. That's lovely. Thank you very much, Jake. Jake Goodenough from Somewhere to Travel To, the Voice Travel Club. Now, don't forget, if you do have any questions for Jake or Diane at any time, then please email them to us, and we can pass those on to the experts. Travelclub@thevoicefm.co.uk.
The problem is all inside your